and welcome back to a new episode of In the Kitchen on Life with Diana and Nick. In this episode, we will create a living organism, a sourdough starter, and we will also talk about how to keep it alive and what to do with it. Let's get started. A sourdough starter contains yeast. Now let's talk a moment about yeast. It is used in all kinds of fermentation. It is used in wine making, it is used in beer making, and of course it is used in bread baking. And it comes in little envelopes or in liquid form. But there is yeast all around us in the air, wild yeast. And with our sourdough starter, we are catching yeast in a solution in a mixture of flour and water. Except we are not using water. We are using unsweetened pineapple juice. Why, you ask? Well, unsweetened pineapple juice has acidity that will keep other harmful organisms out of our starter. So let's start mixing. What we need is the pineapple juice I've just mentioned. We need a 1/4 cup. We need 3.5 tablespoons of flour. It can be whole wheat flour, it can be unbleached all-purpose flour. This is all-purpose flour. We need a mixing container that has also a lid, and we need something to mix it with. So first we add the 3.5 tablespoons to the container, 3.5 tablespoons of flour. And then we'll add the 1/4 cup of pineapple juice. And we mix it up really well. See that there are no lumps in there as much as possible. And it will become a relatively liquid pineapple juice flour mixture, as you can see. Once this is all mixed up, we'll put the lid on the container and set it aside at room temperature for 48 hours. It might be that in 48 hours we'll see some activity, and the activity that we want to see is bubbling. Bubbles at the surface of the mixture. If we don't see activity within 24 to 48 hours, it doesn't matter. We will add more pineapple juice and flour, and then we will see what happens. But we have to stir this mixture in the next 48 hours, at least twice a day, if not 3 times a day. It's been 24 hours and we are back to see how our starter is doing. And as you can see, there are little bubbles on the starter, which is good. That means it shows some activity. That means after 24 hours, we will go now to the next step and add 2 tablespoons of flour and 2 tablespoons of pineapple juice. We are mixing it up again. Mixing it very well. And then we will cover it up. And let it stand for another 24 hours. Our starter has been sitting now for another 24 hours, and let's see if there is any activity. So let's open the lid here and let's take a look. That's interesting. As you can see, the starter has lots and lots of little bubbles on it. That's a very good sign, and that means that we are successful. We are now done with the pineapple juice. Our starter has successfully taken off, and we'll now add 5 tablespoons of flour and 3 tablespoons of purified water. So let's add the flour here, and let's add the water, and we mix it all up as we did before. And then we will cover it up again and let it sit for another 24 hours. Don't forget to stir it up 2 to 3 times a day. And if you lick the spoon now, you will find out that it's not as sweet like it was before from the pineapple juice. It will taste slightly sour, and that is exactly what it should taste like. So let's check it again in 24 hours. Welcome back to day 4 of our starter video. Let's see what happened to it. Oh, we can see lots of activity. There are tons of bubbles, and I want to draw your attention to those little lumps on the surface. Those are actually not lumps, those are bubbles that are trying to form. So that means our starter is grown up and ready for prime time. All we need to do is transfer it to a larger vessel so it can grow and give it another feeding. So let's get started. So let's transfer the starter to a larger container. Here we go. And the starter has a very stringy consistency. As you can see, this is good. The thicker your starter, the better you see the bubbles. If you have a very thin pancake batter-like starter, it's harder for it to develop bubbles because the bubbles immediately disappear. But on a thicker starter, you can see the bubbles a lot better. Okay, so this is the consistency that you want to maintain your starter in, if not even a little bit thicker. Here you can see those nice strings that are forming. This feeding consists of half a cup of flour and 1/4 to 1/3 cup of water. And let's mix that up. Flour goes in, the water goes in, and let's mix it in. If it gets too thick and dry, you can always add a little bit of water, but be very careful because always add very small amounts of water so that it doesn't get too liquid. So this has just the right consistency. As you can see, it's very, very thick and stringy, but it's still soft enough for bubbles to form. So let's talk about maintaining your starter. Now, what to do with this starter? Well, most people make sourdough bread, and Diana made a wonderful video about how to make sourdough bread. It's very easy, incredibly tasty, and I'm addicted to it, so check it out. You can also make sourdough pancakes or many other recipes that use this kind of starter. You can change this starter over to different types of flour. You can make a whole wheat starter. You can do this from scratch, or you just keep feeding this starter, which is made with unbleached white all-purpose flour. You just keep feeding it with wheat flour and it will turn to a wheat flour starter. Now, how to maintain it? If you leave this starter sitting on the counter at room temperature, it will not only double, it will consume all the food, and you have to feed it daily. You should feed a starter with about equal amounts in weight of flour and water. But if you leave it on the counter every day and it doubles every day, that's not really sustainable. I mean, you would have a you have so much starter, you would have to bake tons of bread and everything else daily. So what you can do with it, and what you should do with it, is you put it in the fridge. What happens then is that the yeast goes dormant, and it will not double, it will not rise, but it will be ready when you are ready to bake. You take it out of the fridge about a day before you are ready to bake. Put it on the counter, feed it equal amounts in weight of flour and water, and the yeast will wake up and it will be ready. Now, how long can you keep it without feeding? Experience says about 2 weeks. What you should do after 2 weeks is maybe take it out of the fridge, and if you can't use it, throw away a little bit of the starter and then feed it again. Throwing away a little bit of the starter seems wasteful, but you almost have to do it, because if you just don't use it and keep feeding it, even in the fridge, you will have too much starter. The starter is good as long as it has a white, a little bit yellowish color, depending on what flour you're using. It has a fresh, sour smell and taste. When it gets a gray layer and liquid on top of it, that means the yeast is producing alcohol. That's actually called hooch, and the starter is starting to go bad. Now, a lot of people say, well, you just scrape off the layer and reuse what's under it, feed what's under it, feed the good starter, and it will come to life again and it will recover. I say, why? It's so easy to make a new starter from scratch. Just make a new starter. Why risk your health with old and maybe bad starter? So there you go, a living organism you can bake with, and it's really, really delicious. Check out Dan's bread making video, and thank you for watching, and goodbye.